Hey everybody, it's Mitch, and welcome to my next video. Today we have got another Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 Prestige class description for you. And today, coming at you from the Complete Divine, got our boy, the Temple Raider of Olidammara. So today we are going to talk about what is the Temple Raider of Olidammara? What does it take to become a Temple Raider of Olidammara? What do you get as a Temple Raider of Olidammara? And finally, we're going to talk about how good the Temple Raider of Olidammara is and how you might use it in a build. So let's get started. First off, what is a Temple Raider of Olidammara? Well, quite frankly, the Temple Raider of Olidammara is people who worship Olidammara, who doesn't have a whole lot of temples of his own. So they decide that they're just going to rob other deities' temples of all their valuables. So that's what these guys do, is they sneak into other deities' temples and rob them blind. They're kind of roguelike in that manner. This is something of a rogue deity, so kind of makes sense. So yeah, these guys are constantly planning out their heists, and they know the stakes. They know that robbing from temples of deities is a big deal. Like, clerics and other worshippers of those deities really don't like these guys. These guys are, often put to death if they're caught, so they're ready to fight and make sure that they aren't caught, because you know what'll happen if they do get caught. So yeah, that's the Temple Raider of Olidammara. They're sneaky wise. They get some divine spells because Olidammara figures they could use some. Yeah, that's really what they are. It's a very interesting prestige class. We'll talk about that here in a bit. All right, so now let's talk about what it takes to become a Temple Raider of Olidammara. So first off, you need to be chaotic. Second off, you need a base attack bonus of +5. So this is designed for a martial type build. You also need a few skills. You need Disable Device 4 ranks. You need Knowledge Religion 1 rank. That's pretty easy. You need Open Lock 4 ranks. And you need Search 8 ranks. A little bit of a trick there. Not too crazy with the skills. And there is a special requirement as well. And the special requirement is have to be invited to join by at least 3 members of this prestige class. A little bit of an exclusive guild. So that's what it takes to become a Temple Raider of Olidammara. So let's talk about what you get as a Temple Raider of Olidammara. First off, you get a d6 hit dice, standard for rogues, so makes sense. You get an average base attack bonus, again, standard for rogues. You get a good reflex and will save, but a bad fortitude save. Sounds about right, since you do get some casting, but it is a very roguelike build, so sounds about right. You also get a limited amount of spell casting with a very small spell list. You get progression. You get spellcasting at the same rate that a cleric would, but with way less spells, and you are a divine caster, so you do get that. So it's not terrible in terms of spellcasting. Not the best, because your spells per day is extremely limited, and so is your spell list. Although I'm just going to read off the spell list because it's pretty short. So at first level, you get Detect Law, Detect Secret Doors, Disguise Self, Visibility to Undead, Obscuring Mist, and Protection from Law. Second level, you get Argosie's Grace, Dark Vision, Delay Poison, Invisibility, that's probably one of the more useful ones, Lesser Restoration, and Undetectable Alignment. Can be useful to try and pretend you're not a rogue. You also get Locate Object, get Magic Circle Against Law, get Non-Detection, which can be useful. Get Obscure Object, again useful if you're trying to raid. Remove Curse, Resist Energy, and See Invisibility. And then finally at 4th level you get Airwalk, Confusion, Death Ward, Freedom of Movement, Neutralize Poison, Restoration, and Spell Immunity. So you get some spells, but that's your entire list for the most part. We'll get into that again in a second. So that's what they get in terms of spells. In terms of skills, they get 4+ int and a pretty good list. So their skill list is actually pretty solid. And 4+ int isn't bad. Nowhere near what a rogue gets, but it's still pretty solid. They also gain proficiency with simple weapons and the rapier, as well as proficiency with light armor and medium armor, so that's something. They gain trap finding like the rogue, so that's kind of cool. They also get trap sense, just like a rogue. They also get sneak attack, but they don't get it as often as a rogue does. They only get it every 3 levels, starting at 2nd level, so they get it 2nd, 5th, and 8th. Not the best, but they get some degree of sneak attack. They also gain Uncanny Dodge and Improve Uncanny Dodge, so those are pretty decent class features. They gain Skill Mastery, which is a useful one, and it's one that the rogues get and only a handful of other roguelike classes get, which makes it so that you can take a 10 on a select number of skills, even when you normally wouldn't be able to. So that's kinda nice. And at 10th level, you gain access to the luck domain, and you get the granted power, which just lets you re-roll once a day, or you know whether you succeeded or failed or not. Although sometimes you might know, like, oh, I rolled a nat 1. Well, that's probably a failure. I should probably try and re-roll that. You can do that because that one's likely not going to pass. And I mean, you can't do worse. So could be useful, but yeah, you have to do it before you know whether you succeed or fail. But you can know what you rolled, and if it's a crappy number, well, it might be a failure, especially if it's something you want to make sure you pass. That's really what they get. The luck domain is interesting. It gives them access to some pretty decent spells. Okay. And so, which does add to their spell list. So they get a few more from the luck domain. Just the first through fourth. Well, assuming that they don't get casting in other ways, but typically just first through fourth, because that's all that they get for themselves. So they get some degree of spell casting, some degree of rogue class features. They're a weird mix of a rogue and a cleric. So yeah, let's talk about how good they are and how you might use them in a build. As I was saying, they're a weird mix of a rogue and a cleric. I don't know, it's tricky because they're not particularly great in either fashion. Now, with some Geomancer cheese, you might be able to pull off some use for it. Potentially, I don't know exactly how you'd pull something off, but if you wanted to take some prestige classes that required you have sneak attack, and you also wanted, Geomancer and wanted to advance an arcane caster, but you needed divine so that you can cast an armor, and with wisdom, the way to do it. The best way, maybe not. Now, one thing that's interesting, and this isn't particularly something that makes them good, but the fact that they exist kind of makes other classes good, because they get some of their spells are spells that are typically only arcane. So because they exist and have these spells as divine spells, technically these spells could be made into divine spells, and then something like an archivist could then learn the spell and get these normally arcane spells on their spell list. So that's a thing. This particular prestige class, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how I would go about using it in a build. Personally, if I was going to do it, I would probably try and put it on like Bard, or maybe a fighter, or something or maybe a barbarian, or something from the Home of Battle. Something that just doesn't mess with this at all. It's just in order to gain a little bit of divine casting, qualify for something else later in the build, as well as get a little bit of sneak attack to qualify for some other prestige classes. If you needed to qualify for both divine casting and sneak attack, probably the cheapest way to do it. Just don't see why you would need to qualify for both of those if you weren't planning on advancing your sneak attack and divine casting, because they're not that good at either of these. I don't know, it's a weird one. It seems extremely niche on how to make these work. Are they good? Not typically, but you could probably find a way to make them work. In a low-powered campaign, it could be a fun way to make a character both a bit of a cleric and a bit of a rogue. Maybe add that onto a build that isn't really either. Could be interesting. So, I don't know. Hard to say. This is a really weird one. Anyways, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I always love hearing from you. Like the video if you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing for more D&D 3.5 content, because we do one of these on every class, race, and prestige class in Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. Also, there will be a link down below to my Twitch, as well as to my Discord in the description, so definitely check that out. But anyways, as always, Mitch, seeing you.